Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Best of Pedalshift. On this edition, we go all the way back to March 14th, 2019, for a really fun discussion on the Ohio to Erie Trail from Pedalshift Project 157. Now, the fun thing about this is not only was the content really good, but back in the day, all the way back in 2019, the audio that I had from the two folks that I interviewed here was super echoey. And now here in 2024, I can make it less echoey, which means it's much more fun to listen to now, in addition to all of the great content. So learn much more about the Ohio to Erie Trail. By the way, I was being a little cagey in this episode because if memory serves, I had already decided that I was going to do the big DC to Cincinnati ride, but I hadn't revealed it yet. So I was being super cagey. If that comes about, well, that's why this is a best of. Hope you enjoy. This is a great episode that is a long time in the making. We're talking with some folks behind the Ohio to Erie Trail, which is a fantastic bicycle touring opportunity in the Buckeye State of Ohio. And we'll be getting to that in a few minutes. I'm super excited to share that with you because I have never ridden it, and I learned a lot in this interview. So I'm excited to share it with you. Plus, we touch on a whole bunch of other things regarding elements of the bike tour, of bike touring Ohio, and of course also the Great American Rail Trail, of which it is a piece of it. And we've got a little bit of news breaking. Well, I guess it's already broken out there, but it's breaking on this show, at least through this interview. The Ohio to Erie Trail is a network of trails and road connectors that stretch 326 miles diagonally across Ohio, and it links up Cincinnati, Columbus, and Cleveland, and everything in between. It's one of the Great American Rail Trail gateways, and a trail I've been needing to learn more about for really a long time. Luckily, I have two great ambassadors of the trail, Lisa Darris and Jody Zeranin, on to chat up some Buckeye State bike trails. A little bit of an intro of them. Lisa Darris, in late 2015, became the part-time executive coordinator for the Ohio to Erie Trail organization. And Lisa handles the day-to-day operations of the organization and reports to the board president and officers. She also serves on the Community Advisory Committee for the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission's Transportation Department. So that's kind of a big deal. She is an active volunteer with Columbus Outdoor Pursuits and operates Olentangy Paddle, a pop-up livery service in Central Ohio, and she is a graduate of Ohio State. Joining Lisa on this interview is Jody Zeranin. She is a board member of the Ohio to Erie Trail organization, and she serves also as the marketing committee chair. She co-founded the Friends of Camp Chase Trail and is a past leader of the Ohio delegation at the National Bike Summit, which is right here in Washington, D.C. She's currently attending Ohio University for a master's in public administration and holds a BS in business admin from Ohio State. I'm super excited to bring you Lisa and Jody talking about the Ohio to Erie Trail. Lisa and Jody, welcome to Pedalshift.
Thanks. Thank you, Tim.
I am really interested in the Ohio to Erie Trail, largely because I feel a little behind the curve. It feels like that this amazing trail that literally spans the entire state of Ohio kind of just came into my vision within the last couple of years. So I'd love to sort of back up in case any of the listeners are sort of in the same boat as I was. What's the history of the Ohio to Erie Trail, and how did the series of regional trails get knitted together over time into what's become this amazing cross-state network?
Well, it began with Ed Honton. So he had a vision of connecting across the state in the canals and railroads. And he brought his vision to other advocates. And in 1991, the Ohio to Erie Trail Fund was created. And it's now, sadly, Ed was lost in 2005, but his vision continues under the board of directors. And it's grown into a 326-mile route. And I'm glad that it's on your radar because we really are feeling like the critical mass has been reached and the word is getting out about the Ohio to Erie Trail.
I think that one of the great things about it is because it's such a long, multi-day trail that goes through the three big C cities, as I think Ohioans call them, Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati, that it is a perfect opportunity for somebody who's looking for a larger off-road trail adventure, or mostly off-road trail adventure. And in that sense, it's mostly completed. Like a high percentage of it is off-road surface. how much of it is still using road linkages between the trails? And what's the signage like, especially in those C cities of the trail?
The exact amount of roads versus dedicated trail. We have a great board member who has ridden the trail so many times, and he's also got an engineering background. So I'm going to give you some exact figures here, which I think your listeners will appreciate. So out of a total mileage of 326 miles, 16.2% of it is still on streets and roads. And then the dedicated trail is 83.8. We have a grand total here of each section, and just looking. So we have an estimated 53 miles that are still left to convert. And I will want to make a note that some of those miles we know will never be converted. For example, I live in Columbus, and so there's really no place to put a downtown trail just because we just don't have any corridors left. But I think all the folks who are traveling along the trail will find that the streets are very pedestrian and bike friendly in downtown Columbus. So even though I think you're on the Columbus area for a few miles, it's not a scary experience whatsoever. And I'll add for the signage, the trail it's very well marked. It has signage and pavement markings in many places. In general, our major signage is our totem style upright signs. And then there's also places where if a sign is not existing, the board members have placed a Route 1, like an oval sign that they're smaller than the totem signs. And then, as I mentioned, in the metro areas, especially Columbus, we have the pavement markings. And then we just like to say, as you get into the metropolitan areas, just be aware that not every bike route is part of the trail. So we have people consult their resources, the maps, so that they're making sure to get the right turns. Because we've sometimes heard that people miss a turn, but it doesn't say Ohio to Erie Trail. So just don't take every bike route if it's not marked.
Yeah, in some ways that's a feature, not a bug, because it speaks to the infrastructure that exists in each of these cities that is beyond just what the Ohio to Erie Trail is. So that's kind of exciting as somebody who maybe is coming into the cities and wants to either take a day off or to explore some of the great things that are in each of these towns. So it's really not such a horrible thing, especially if you're coming off of a tour. You're like, I'm ready to eat or grab a beer or something like that.
Yeah, for sure.
That's great. Now, you had mentioned that one of the the signage signatures was an oval with the number 1. And is that referring to Ohio Bike Route 1, or is it some other nomenclature?
Yeah, it is. It's a state route number 1.
And my understanding also is that the U.S. bicycle route system is going to be expanding with a designation for the Ohio to Erie Trail. Did I understand that correctly?
Yep. So U.S. Bicycle Route 21 it will mirror the Ohio to Erie Trail, Cincinnati to Cleveland. And we haven't really pointed it out, but I want to say that our trail name shows the starting and end points in the trail. So it's the Ohio River in Cincinnati to Lake Erie and Cleveland.
That's an important designation. I'm glad you actually mentioned that, because that does make a lot of sense. That's what the name is, and it's the actual connector. So thank you.
Sure.
You had mentioned Cleveland and Cincinnati, and I think that those are the two endpoints to this. I'm really curious, is there a dominant direction that cyclists choose, either Cleveland to Cincinnati or vice versa? And why do you think that is?
Honestly, I don't know if there is a predominant choice among our travelers of the trail. I will say that the prevailing winds, if you're a person who pays attention to that sort of thing, the prevailing winds in Ohio go from coming from the west and also coming from the south. Okay. So if you start in the south, you are more likely to get a tailwind pushing you up to the north. But keep in mind, it's also Ohio. So it can also change. But we actually came out just recently, about a month ago, with another version of trail guides that start
in the south and head to the north. And I would say, looking at the folks who have ordered those trail guides, it's pretty much split 50-50 between those who have ordered the southbound trail guides versus the northbound trail guides.
Gotcha. That's interesting. When I've just been looking at people doing crazy guy on a bike journals or things like that, it seems like what I've been seeing is a lot of Cincinnati to Cleveland. And I guess the wind direction would sort of inform that. But I think that the sales of your maps are probably going to be a better data point to show which direction people are going. So that's good to know. All I know is that the predominant wind is always the opposite of the direction that I'm going. I'm always getting it.
Well, and as for terrain, the flatter parts of the trail are Cincinnati to Columbus, and then it gets to be, more elevation, Columbus to Cleveland. So that can be nice. You can sort of warm up on the first part, and then you're more ready for the hills on the second part.
For the most part, though, this is a relatively even grade, even in the eastern part of the state, because these are old rail right-of-ways for the most part, or are there other areas that are more akin to the hilly nature of eastern Ohio?
Well, I think the easiest answer is that our GPX files are available through Cycle Life HQ. So if you look at all 4 sections, you will see ups and downs. And so the parts on the rail or next to a rail line, in some cases, are, as you've said, they have a maximum of a 3% grade. But like in Battelle Darby Metro Park, that's part of Camp Chase Trail. So Camp Chase is along the rail, but then when it comes through the Metro Park, it's coming up from the creek, and there's a pretty major hill there. So our rail trail does have a hill in the middle of it. And I would say that can be found all throughout the trail, the whole 326 miles, that sort of situation.
I mean, in some ways, I kind of prefer that to have it reflect what the gradient of the area around is. I mean, I really enjoy some of the trails around the DC area where I'm from and beyond. But sometimes when it's just flat the whole time, it's a little more fun to have a little hill thrown in there. So that's pretty good. You had mentioned 326, which I think is a very important number for the Ohio to Erie Trail. One of the fun things that I think is unique for the trail is something that's called the 326 Club. What's the story behind that, and how many people a year claim membership in that fine organization?
Yeah, so just kind of a fun thing that we came up with. Actually, the people who traveled on the trail, maybe back in 2016, were sending us fan mail. And they were saying, hey, we just did the entire trail in one trip. And they were really excited to have that accomplishment. And we thought, well, why don't we give them a little fanfare and create a 326 club and put their names and their photos on our website. So you can find members and their photos on our website under the 326 Club. And we also send folks just a complimentary sticker set, a small one and a big one, so they can proudly display those as well. And another fun tradition that kind of is a part of this, Jody mentioned that the trail start and finish, the north end terminus is up in Edgewater on Lake Erie. So that's where we get the name Erie. And then the southern terminus is the Ohio River. So folks who do the entire trip, the tradition is to dip their tires in each body of water. So if you're heading from south to north, you're going to dip your back tire in the Ohio River and your front tire in Lake Erie, which is just a fun tradition. And you'll see some photos of that on the 326 page for those folks who made that accomplishment.
It seems like such a no-brainer of a thing to do for a trail like this that I'm surprised that I haven't seen it for some others. Now, of course, this is when I have a bunch of listeners go, oh no, the Cowboy Trail has it, and whatever. But I think it's really kind of cool. And I know I have at least one listener to the show who she did it last year, if I recall correctly. So I think it's just a fun thing to have. Sort of like when you accomplish something with incredibly hot or spicy food at a restaurant, you get to put your picture up. It's the same idea.
Right.
So you get the adventure out of it.
Right.
Speaking of that, just for a typical through ride, I get the impression just from a mileage perspective that a typical one-shot experience on the Ohio to Erie Trail is about 5 to 6 days. Does that sort of jibe with what you're hearing and your experience with riders is?
Yeah. Well, what do you think, Jenny? I guess, what I would say is, well, parts of this trail are close to large populations. So the vast majority of riders in the populated areas are going to be from the local area. So we will certainly see through riders packed bicycles here and there, and there's parts of the trail that you're going to be the only person in the trail. We've got a nice variety of rural areas and populated metropolitan areas. And so I guess 5 to 6 days for the people that are going through.
And if you're a little bit of a slower rider, don't be intimidated by 5 to 6 days. I've had people take up to 2 to 3 weeks because, as you mentioned, there's lots of fun spurs. They may take a day trip to like Yellow Springs, which is actually not on our trail, but just 10 miles off of it. And you can get to it by using another trail. So it just really depends on what pace you want to do. We do have some itineraries listed on our website as well that you can check out. So you can say, okay, I'm a person who wants to get 40 miles a day. Where did 40 miles a day put me? So you can use that for your planning.
Yeah, that's a really fantastic resource because the mileage that people want to travel in any given day can really vary from the 50 to 60 miles is sort of the average wheelhouse of a typical multi-day bike tourist. But, if you're traveling with family or with somebody who's brand new or you're in a different type of a rig, yeah, your mileage may vary. I also know that at least on the Gap and on the C&O and in this neck of the woods that we're starting to see some endurance athletes tackle these long trails and doing them in outrageous, like 1 day or 2 day kind of things. Have you caught wind of anything like that on the Ohio to Erie Trail at all?
Yeah, we do have a few people who are in our 326 club who have done it because they are training for like an Ironman or another similar type of competition. And they have done it in 24 hours.
That's remarkable.
Mm-hmm.
That is a very serious amount of mileage to do in 24 hours. That's akin to some of the Race Across America, the Ram Ride and things like that.
Yeah.
So, amazing. Yeah. Is there a record? Do you have any kind of a sense of what the record is?
We don't really track that kind of thing, unfortunately. But I know probably just anecdotally, I would say around 24 hours is going to be the record that I have heard just anecdotally.
That's impressive. It's not the type of cycling that I like to do, and we don't talk a ton about on the show, but I'm sort of so impressed by it. I always bring it up when I have interviews with folks like you on some of these trails that have that kind of thing happen. So that's kind of cool. Do you see 4-season cycling on the trail with things like fat bikes becoming more of a thing, or is it much more of a 3-season type of situation?
So a good point to make here is that this trail, especially in the urban areas, is usually meticulously groomed. So when there's snow outside in Ohio, a lot of folks who use the trail for commuters, in especially like in the Columbus area, are still able to use the trails because they are maintained very well. So do you need a fat tire bike during the winter? Well, it doesn't hurt. But I do have some folks who say, oh yeah, I use this segment of the trail to commute. And on really bad days, I get a ride from a friend or something like that. We are seeing an increase of people who, I myself am a hybrid rider only because I never wanted a little bit of gravel to stop me from going where I wanted to go. And I think it's the same people who are riding the fatter tire bikes. They may want to go someplace someday where it's not nice and paved, but they can certainly ride the trail with ease, as can any hybrid rider as well.
I grew up on Lake Ontario, so I know all about lake effects, especially for the northern parts of the trail. But I'm curious, at what point in the spring would you say typically, because I know that this varies from year to year, that you're not talking about grooming the trail anymore? It's pretty thawed out. The snow's all melted. When's sort of the beginning of spring season for you? And what's sort of the rough months for that prime cycling season after the snow all melts?
Well, generally April to September are the prime trail times. And the Ohio weather would be 50 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit in those times, but it could always be more or less during that period. We can have it snow in April. But Ohio's weather, it's variable all year long. So anybody that comes needs to be prepared for hot, cold, rain, and where you talked about the lake effect snow, that's pretty much just the greater Cleveland area. And then the further from Columbus to Cincinnati, we have cold winters, but really not significant precipitation.
Yeah, when the wind blows right off of one of those lakes, you can get 2 feet of snow, and it's just called Tuesday. So it's a different type of climate down further south. So yeah, I get that. One of the things that I think is really fascinating about this trail is the fact that it goes through a ton of really iconic towns aside from the larger cities. So lodging looks pretty abundant. What's the camping mix like for people who are looking to be totally self-supported? In other words, they're not going to look at a B&B or a hotel or something like that. Are we talking state parks, private location relative to the trail? What's sort of the setup for folks who are looking to camp this adventure?
Well, and currently we have 22 camping locations available. So 16 are on the trail or within 1 mile. And then 6 of those are more than a mile from the trail. And we are updating that list all the time when we hear about them. The trail, we don't own land. We don't actually own the trail either. So we have to work with our local partners to create these camping areas. And so we know of, well, I just came from a Central Ohio Greenways meeting and I heard an announcement of 3 primitive sites being planned in the coming year or 2. So we are excited about that. And we also, we used to hear about, the trail, the signage is challenging, or this road connector was challenging. And we've gotten past all that. So that's great. We've graduated to the point where it's like, you need more camping. So it's actually a good thing. And we are getting that message out to our local partners, and we'll be able to announce more in the coming years. And of course, our resources available on the Plan Your Trip part of our website. So that's where that information lives.
For folks who are listening, I'm going to have a link to all of the campground pages and the Plan Your Trip pages in the show notes. So make sure you go check that all out.
Another economical option in the metro areas of Columbus, Cincinnati, Cleveland, and Akron, people can check out warm showers or Airbnb for some economical options.
What's really funny is I have this whole bike touring podcast, yet I've never used warm showers before. But I know it's such an important filler piece for a lot of folks. Even folks who are going to be doing a lot of camping, they'll find that they can kind of straddle that bit of budget versus having a roof over your head, at least on one of the nights in some of the larger towns. So that's really great. And I encourage folks to check that out too, as another option to kind of keep the trip budget a little bit on the lower side. I wanted to talk a little bit about the Great American Rail Trail, because the Ohio to Erie Trail is one of the named gateway trails for it. I'm curious what it's been like working with Rails to Trails Conservancy. And how do you envision the OTET being as a part of this larger network? How do you see the future of that larger network impacting the Ohio to Erie Trail?
Well, I'm head of the marketing committee. And when I found out about this, I was like, okay, great. A big part of my job is being taken care of. So we're very excited. We learned about it, I think, December, and it was like, this is very exciting. So, and I guess we can make another sort of continual announcement on that is, so the big Great American Rail Trail route reveal will be nationwide May 8th, and Columbus is going to be one of 4 sites. So we'll be part of the big route reveal. And so folks that are in the Ohio area, it will take place at the Camp Chase Trail, Wilson Road Park trailhead, May 8th. And we're going to kick off the festivities at 12:30. So we're thrilled to be one of 4 sites on this 4,000-mile trail. So we see it as a really great thing.
Yeah. And I think what Jody kind of alluded to in terms of her job being a little easier is that I've noticed an uptick in people from other states who are contacting us. And I told her I need to start asking whether they heard about us through the announcement that just recently happened about this Great American Trail. Because although, like you said, you feel like it just came on your radar a couple of years ago, I've had a number of calls in the past 30 days that have said, where have you been all my life? And I think that is because of the greater exposure that the Ohio to Erie Trail is getting, being a part of this Great American Trail. So it's very, very exciting for us.
I'm curious, are there any obligations that are asked of you to be a part of the Great American Rail Trail, or is there anything? I mean, it seems like that it's this wonderful thing that Rails to Trails Conservancy is doing, sort of doing the work of, I guess, organizing the linking of these things together. What are sort of the obligations that you're being asked to do, being part of this larger network?
There's really not much to do other than to help them promote it and help them. Right now, even though they have a 4,000-mile route in mind, it's not done yet. And it's going to take many years to get done. And so I'm sure in the future, if we're asked to provide a letter of support or something to a neighboring area to connect and fill in the gaps for this 4,000-mile trail, we would be expected to do something like that, which of course we would happily do. So there really isn't anything beyond that we're being asked to do. So how great is that?
This sounds like a good deal. Yeah. I mean, especially if it sounds like that you're already within the first month or two of the announcement, starting to get more folks who are like, oh yeah, there's this 326-mile trail that I would love to ride that I'd never heard of before. It's already paying some dividends off to you regionally. But I think once these things start really getting connected, that's gonna really light the fire, I would think.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, that's exciting. So May 8th is the big announcement. We'll definitely cover that on the show. So for folks who are in the area near Columbus, go check that out. That's pretty exciting. What's the thing that, here we are, 2019, what's the thing that you're most looking forward to on the Ohio to Erie Trail this year? Do you have anything that's new that's coming, or any goals that you have that you're particularly excited about hitting? What's 2019 like for you all?
Well, and we mentioned the big May 8th event. And then we also, our Ohio Department of Natural Resources has done the groundwork to create a statewide trail plan. So we had a recent changing of the administration, but we do hope to see that released this year. And Ohio to Erie Trail provided a lot of input on the statewide trail plan. So hopefully more to come there. And then
another thing that we're looking forward to, as we do every year, is we have an annual fundraiser ride in September. It's the Moffett Memorial Ride, named after our past president, Tom Moffett. And we've got 45 riders registered. The registration, is already full, but it is always just a beautiful time to ride in early September. And one of the things on the trail I'm looking forward to the most when I ride it in September is there's been a lot of activity up in the north end in the Cleveland area. And last year we got to see some of it, some of the construction starting, orange cones and things like that. But it wasn't to a point really where we could ride any of the new sections. However, this year, a lot of the sections will be done in the Cleveland area. And I've actually been able to walk some of the sections, and just beautiful. You're walking on these ridge lines overlooking the city of Cleveland. And maybe it's because I'm a native of the Northeast Ohio area, but it really puts the city in a really cool light. And you've got kind of like this steampunk personality that comes out, and you've got the Cuyahoga River, and you've got the barges and the drawbridges, and you're up above it looking down from a bike or as a pedestrian. It's going to be a really exciting addition to the trail up there.
That sounds really interesting. That sounds reminiscent of how the Great Allegheny Passage is outside of Pittsburgh. When you said steampunk, it was exactly what I envisioned, because it's going through that industrial area. So, that's really cool. I'm looking forward to seeing that at some point. And it's always fun when you can connect up those parts with new trail. That's going to be really exciting this year as well. And what can listeners do to learn more about the trail and your organization that helps to sort of maintain and organize it?
Well, it's kind of a two-part answer because, as I said, we don't actually own the trail, so we don't maintain the trail, but we are working to work with partners to complete it. So the first thing people can do is become a friend of the trail, so that we certainly are. The funds that we raise go to then help build the trail, and then our local partners are working to maintain it. So I can send you this link as well, but the organizations that maintain it are also included on we have a local trail groups page that's linked off of the Plan Your Trip page. But we have a wonderful group, Friends of Madison County Parks and Trails, And they've been working almost since the inception of the Ohio to Erie Trail group. And they've worked to build them. And now, just in the last few years, they've worked to turn that over to the county engineer to maintain it. And so then they have their county parks funds are helping to maintain the trail. So that's a huge win. That's the advocates acquired the right of way, build it, and now they've identified a sustainable maintenance plan.
Now, I think that's a really good point, because my inartfully worded question actually brought about something that's really important, is that the trails themselves are really, really hyper-locally handled. And when you're riding a long trail like this, it's not just one singular organization that's doing the overview of every bit of your experience, but it truly takes a village, to coin a phrase, to make one of these things possible. So I'm glad we touched on that.
For sure. And let me add one more thing about the Friends of Madison County. They have a wonderful primitive campsite that's right along the Prairie Grass trailhead. And it has a shelter, it has electricity, it has places to pitch tents, and it has a bathroom with running water. So the only thing that is not available is a shower. But that's, it's a pretty fancy primitive campsite, if you ask me.
I'm used to the C&O towpath here. It starts in DC and goes to Cumberland. And we're lucky if we get a porta potty that has been changed within the last few weeks and a pump well water. So this sounds like heaven. So I will add that one to my list should I end up on the trail at some point in the near future, which I hope to do. So I just wanted to thank you both, Lisa and Jody, for being on the show. And I learned a lot about the Ohio to Erie Trail. Any last thoughts, any takeaways for somebody who's thinking about riding the trail maybe in 2019?
Well, we mentioned that we recently become participants in the Cycle Life HQ site. So some great resources are available there. And then we like to let people know our social media tag is OH, the number 2, and then Erie. So it kind of helps us distinguish from the Ohio and Erie towpath, which is just the Cleveland section. And then there's also the Erie Canal, which goes up along Lake Erie. So we are Ohio to Erie. And then you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. What else?
Just if you do sign up as a friend, we do a newsletter twice a year. And in that newsletter, it has all of our progress updates. So you can see what's going into engineering phase versus construction phase and get other updates about the trail.
And I think we mentioned that our map, it used to be southbound only, and our new version is the northbound. So now you have a choice of which map set you buy. So they're both 4 map sets in one purchase. You don't have to buy them separately.
And on behalf of everybody who, like me, has had to read a map backwards before, I thank you very, very much for doing that. For those of us who go against the grain sometimes. Lisa and Jody, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate you joining Pedalshift.
Thanks, Tim.
It was a great day.
A big thank you to Lisa and Jody for joining the show and talking about the Ohio to Erie Trail. I'm very excited about potentially cycling this year. I don't know when that's going to happen, but if I were a betting person, I would throw some money on me getting at least some element on that. I'm kind of intrigued with the prospect of joining that 326 club. I don't know. We'll have to check that out. If you want to learn more about the organization, of course, go to ohiotoerietrail.org. They're on the socials at OH2Erie, so Ohio number 2 Erie. And I want to give a quick name check shout out to friend of the show, Preston Page Piper, for giving me the connection to Lisa and Jody. Thank you for joining. You can find Pedalshift at pedalshift.net for more great bicycle touring content. You can hear the Pedalshift project through Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app. Opening music courtesy of Jason Kent off his self-titled album. The track is called America. Check out his band Sunfield's latest release, Mono Mono, wherever cool music is available.